Hello, I am so excited to join you today as we shift the conversation into the topic of self-care. And the ultimate form of self-care, you might not realize, is something that's right underneath your nose, but most often we push it to the side, and that's the conversation about sleep. So my name is Soda Kuczkowski. I am a sleep health educator and a certified sleep coach. I have been in the industry for about 20 years, and I serve in my mission in 3 different ways. I have a company called Start With Sleep that provides programming and training for sleep health education and services. I have a brand called the Doze, which is all about sleep-enhancing products. And I am the host of the Doze podcast, which is really about putting the science of sleep into actionable tips for your personal and your professional success. And I am joined today by Miss Maryann.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Maryann Rivera-Dannert, and I am the creator and host of HealingHer Within podcast. I am also the CEO of MRD Empowerment Solutions, where I focus on working with women who are stuck, feel unfulfilled, and are ready for the next step. So we work through inner child and inner teen healing so you can become the best version of yourself. So Soda, how do we get here today? How do we get to the point of restlessness?
Well, when we're talking about success, right, generally we like to focus on being hyper-productive. We have normalized hyper-productivity. And what we've done is it's gotten to a point where resting feels unnatural. We have been introduced to hustle culture, and we feel that the more we hustle, that is the secret to success, correct? Right? But what it really is a barrier to sustainable success. Because when we're well rested, we show up as our best selves.
Yeah. So how do you feel about, because I've heard this multiple times, when people say, I'll sleep when I'm dead?
You know, I hear that often, and in my work, it doesn't surprise me because we have a lot of misconception as to what healthy sleep actually looks like. You know, as I said, we've normalized restlessness. So if it takes someone an hour or 2 to fall asleep, they don't think much of it if they're waking up repeatedly throughout the night. But then it manifests itself in different ways. You know, we try to show up as leaders, we try to show up in our businesses, and we don't have clarity, we don't have focus, right? When we sleep well, it is a learning tool. We can memorize information better. We're more productive and creative. But the thing is when we don't make space for wellness, right, which sleep is the ultimate form of self-care, we have to make room for illness because at some point it will catch up with you.
Right.
So I tell them, you know, the new hustle is sleep, right? We need to reset our hustle and really rethink the way that we show up in the world.
Yeah, that's so true. And sleep, when we're deprived of sleep, it causes so much more. And like you said, if we don't make time for sleep, you're making time for illnesses because stress, depression, body aches, and so much more happens. So where do you think this need came from? Like this society, you know, formalizing or making it the new norm of hustling?
Well, I mean, for a long time, we felt that if we did more, that it showed our value. And I think as women, more so, we're always trying to prove ourselves. So the more that we can take on. And a lot of times, especially as women, we carry, no offense to the gentlemen in the audience, but we carry this invisible mental load, right? So not only are we trying to do for ourselves, we're often the caregivers, we're the partners, the spouses, you know, mothers, we're taking on multiple roles. And the thing is we're often pouring from an empty cup, right?
Yeah. And we are so programmed as nurturers to take care, like you said, of everyone else. And by the time that we're ready for that sleep, something else is happening and the next thing is happening. So why do high-achieving women, especially, struggle with rest, and how does that show up in their leadership?
Well, I think it goes back to that value, right? We are always trying to prove our worth. So, you know, maybe in the workplace, we're the first one to show up, we're the last one to leave. We feel guilty if we make space for our children or make space for our families. And we're constantly trying to put out this high output, but what it ends up being is very low alignment. And at some point, it comes to the point where we burn out.
Yeah. So you've mentioned that this is something that we're accustomed to. Talk a little bit more about that. Like, where did that first start? What were the first signs that we started seeing this behavior and thought that, oh, this is what is expected of me, so I have to do it?
Well, I think, as a culture, as women have moved into the workplace and we've taken on more roles, I think that, that speaks to it. Because we are doing multiple things and holding multiple spaces, it's become very difficult for us. Because society in general, we've taken on more, but the thing is, we haven't subtracted. So in a previous episode, that we listened to earlier, we were talking about the need to subtract things. And that's the thing. We continue to add, but nothing has been taken off of our plate. So as we move into the workplace, we're still caring at home. We're still making dinner. We're still handling all the shopping. We're doing all of these different things. And it doesn't allow us space to do everything. So it is a lot to take on.
Yeah. And I think from a society standpoint also, it started way back during the wars. Women were traditionally at home while the men went out, but as deaths happened, divorce, more women were forced to go out into the workplace. And like you said, we're taking more on, but not subtracting. So what would you say are some good tips to get into some good sleep?
Well, when anyone ever asks me, like, what's your number one sleep tip? And there are some that I go to, light regulation being one of the most important. But even before that, good sleep really starts with prioritizing it. And what does that look like for you? In my work, I work with a lot of different demographics, but most specifically like first responders and protective services. And it's all about looking at what are the variables in your life, everything from, what do you do for a living? What is your commute time? Are you a caregiver? Do you have a spouse at home? Do you have a second job? Like, everyone's life looks different. So prioritizing your sleep, what does that look like? Which leads me to something you and I had spoken about previously, because when it comes to our sleep and when it comes to our rest, it's something that we put off to the future. We're like, oh, I have a vacation in 66 days, or my birthday's next month, so I'm getting a massage. But you recently took a trip and came to this revelation where sleep was kind of like prominent for you. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. So back in July, I went on a plant medicine retreat, and so it was Ayahuasca. And one of the things that I sat with after the first dose, I just kept on hearing spirits saying, rest, rest. And during the educational part of the retreat, I remember the shaman and the teacher saying that everyone purges differently. If you're not familiar with ayahuasca, there's a lot of purging. You could, go to the restroom, you could cry, you can sleep, you can shake. There's different things. And it was like, rest. I'm like, but I'm not tired. And I just kept on hearing rest. So I lay down. And has anyone ever gotten home, driven home, and you're like, how did I get here? Like, time just zooms by. That's what happened. When I opened up my eyes, it was past midnight. When we took the medicine, it was shortly after 6 p.m. So it was like 6.5 hours just have passed. That entire week, I probably slept more than I had slept in the past month. And it wasn't a sleep, because sometimes we do oversleep and we wake up more tired. Mm-hmm. This was restful sleep. I felt more clear. Definitely clarity was there, just so many downloads, things that I wanted to do personally in my life, things that I wanted to do in my business. It was just a lot of clarity. And I think that that's the thing when it comes to rest. Sometimes you can overdo it. You just want to be lazy. But sometimes your body, just listen to what your body's saying. I think it was Dr. Maisha, making you a doctor. Maisha spoke about, the intuition, and that is so true, especially for women. Our intuition speaks very loudly, but we have been programmed to ignore that voice and to listen to what society has to say, what people in our circles have to say. Listen to your body. Your body will let you know how much sleep you need. And one of the things that has helped me figure out, because some, reports say you need 5 hours of sleep. You can succeed on that. Some say 7, some say 12. For me, I know what worked for me. But you as the expert, before I answer, how would you guide someone in figuring out how much sleep they need?
Well, that's definitely a very individualized response. We don't want to sleep less than 6 hours per night because that's where we see the correlation between a number of negative factors. So higher risk for things like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. There's a whole long list I won't dive into, but 6 is what we don't want to get less of. But, to your point about, sleeping more than you had and feeling that you actually felt re-energized in a better, clear space of clarity. I spend my days speaking about physical rest, but people don't realize there's actually 7 different types of rest. So when it comes to physical rest, they're active and passive. Passive being napping and sleeping, active being stretching, yoga, maybe a floating spa or bath. But we also need mental rest, emotional rest, sensory rest, social rest, spiritual and creative. We need 7 different types of rest. And that intuition that you're talking about, we often think, oh, well, one thing will fit it. If I get a massage, it'll fill all of these different cups, but it doesn't. Which is why when we get together with friends or family and we have good laughs, right, that fills our social cup. When we get together with our community, that fills our social cup. Spiritual rest, when we either attend service, or we volunteer, or we give back to our community, it fills our cup in different ways. But we've gotten away from learning how to listen to ourselves. But when we're well rested, that's how we show up as our best. It underscores everything that we want to do on a personal and a professional level.
Yeah, so true. And you mentioned the 7 different types of sleep, of rest, and that is so true, because when I was out in the jungle, there was no technology. There was no chores. We had people cooking for us every single day. There was no worries. We were just sitting with ourselves, and it was absolutely amazing, absolutely beautiful. So the way I figured out how many hours of sleep I need, this was a podcast that I heard years ago, was I pick a day, usually either Saturday or Sunday, that you don't have anything planned to do. So there's no alarms waking you up. The day before, go to sleep at your normal time. And in the morning when you wake up just naturally and figure out how many hours. So I did this about 3 different times, because the first time I did it, I think I slept for like 12 hours.
Depends on how sleep deprived you are.
So yes, I was definitely sleep deprived, tired, exhausted, and all of the above. The second time I did it, it was like 9.5. And then the third time I did it was about 8. Now that I am a full-time entrepreneur, one of the things that I am very adamant about is not setting any meetings before 10 o'clock in the morning. That's not to say that I don't get up at 6, but I love my slow mornings. I get up to the sunlight, and now that fall is here, that, shifted from like 5:30, 6 o'clock to about 7 or so, but I'm not rushing to get out of bed. I typically sleep about 7 to 8 hours, and I can definitely feel it in my attitude, in my creativity, in my body, if I get less than that.
Yeah. Well, there's something called a chronotype. So you might have heard of like an early riser or a night owl.
Yes.
There's actually 4 variations of a chronotype. So when you're talking about connecting with nature, I always tell people, have you ever gone camping, right? When you go to sleep and you wake up, that's how you find your natural rhythm. But again, depending on how sleep deprived you are, you might clock some additional hours. But based on what your chronotype is actually the best time for you to do certain things. So I'm what's known as a bear chronotype. I follow a schedule of 11 to 7, but my daughter just started middle school, so now I'm on a 10 to 6.
Oh.
I had to shift it because she's starting school earlier, right? What we produce a hormone called melatonin at a certain time, and that's what tells us when to go to bed, but there's a number of external factors that can work against us in terms of that. We have our night owls, which are our wolves, they like to go to bed at like midnight or 1 o'clock. Ideally, they'd like to wake up at 10 o'clock, but guess what? They got to be up for work at 6, so it doesn't align, right? We have my early risers, which they like to go to bed. The example would be, a famous celebrity for it is like Mark Wahlberg. He goes to bed at 8 o'clock. He's getting up at 3:30 in the morning. My middle brother's just like that. He's followed that schedule his entire life. He likes to be, and then the opposite people marry each other. And then we have our dolphins, which are about 10% of the population. And these are my insomniacs. If you know anything about dolphins, they sleep with half their brain awake, and they're all over the place. But these are the people where if they stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning, they think the solution is to go to bed at 8 o'clock the next day because you can catch up on sleep. But you can only offset sleep debt. The best way to reset your circadian rhythm and to stay in sync is to be consistent about it. Like if you stay up, go to bed at the same time within a 3-day period. But to go back to the point that you had asked about your best sleep tip, because people are always looking to buy something. Right. And again, I always tell people it is not about addition, it's about subtraction. If I come across someone who says, Soda, you can't help me, I've tried everything, that is the person that I know, like, we need to get down to the basics because they're adding supplements, they're trying to buy expensive mattresses, and you cannot buy your way, right, to a good night's sleep. It's about what are the things that we can take away, and what are the most natural things that we can do is make sure that we get enough light regulation. So first thing in the morning, 10 to 15 minutes of morning light, right? Yeah. We produce a hormone called serotonin, and if we produce that in the morning, in the evening, we produce the hormone melatonin, which beyond better belief, people think it helps them fall asleep. It actually helps you regulate your sleep-wake cycle. So it doesn't actually initiate sleep. It keeps you asleep. So we misuse that, right? Again, at that noon hour, 10 to 15 minutes, and if you're someone who wears, prescription glasses, take those off. We want that sun to hit the optic nerve. Again, that sends a signal, all systems go. And then at night, we want to limit artificial light sources because, look at the room we're in right now, right? A lot of times people's homes are like this, or they might start to nod off on the couch watching TV. They go to the bathroom, it's the brightest light in their home. It's where they brush their teeth, they put their makeup, they get ready for the day, right? And we've sent signals to our brain that it's time to be awake, that instant signal. So we want to limit. We want all lights after the sun sets to be an amber or red hue, because again, that will help our body release melatonin so that we'll sleep much better. But because of our schedules, and that looks different for everybody, especially for entrepreneurs and business owners, sometimes we work late into the night, right? So we're on our phones, we are on our tablets, our computers, we are inundated with light much later than we should be, so we're more sensitive to it. Right. And it's often the reason that we have trouble falling asleep, or even if we fall asleep initially because we're sleep deprived, we're waking up repeatedly throughout the night and we can't maintain that sleep. So with that, I have a question for you, because I know for me personally, I've worked in this space. I've always valued my sleep, but even in the recent years, I've had my companies now just under 11 years, and I've set some clear boundaries, because when I was in the corporate world, it was, answering emails whenever, like always hyper vigilant, always putting out fires. And one clear boundary that I've set for myself is I use the night mode and the do not disturb mode on my phone. So after 8 o'clock, I'm in the night mode. It turns my screen amber. No notifications come through. So unless I want to go in and check my email or my social media, I don't engage with that. So no one can disrupt my peace if I choose to stay away. What's one boundary that you've set for yourself now that you have learned to prioritize your sleep and your rest? What's one thing that you have set for yourself?
So it's not sleep related, but one boundary that I have found myself is that on Sundays, I will sit down and look at my upcoming week. Mm-hmm. If something is not already on my calendar on that Sunday, it's not happening. I used to always somebody invited me to this last minute gala or this event or this and that. And it's like, wait a minute, you invited me last minute. You knew about this months ago. And it just caused so much stress, because now I have to figure out, what am I wearing? How am I going to get there? Possibly I have to shift something on my schedule and things like that. So that is one big boundary that has helped me with my time. And self-care is on Sundays, I will look at my schedule. And if it's not on there for that upcoming week, it's a no, thank you.
Well, believe it or not, that's actually you setting a boundary around your mental rest. Because it's important for us to notice that whenever we say yes to something else, we say no to ourselves. Yes. So that time blocking or making sure that you're managing your schedule is all part of it. Because believe it or not, rest and sleep are not interchangeable. Rest is the bridge between good and bad sleep, which is why we have such a hard time managing our stress response and our stress management, because we think about either winding down, right before bed, half hour, an hour before bed, we're like, oh, I know I had this crazy day or I had this crazy week, but in this 30 minutes, I'm going to make it all go away so that I can get my solid 8 hours. But I have an episode entitled that bedtime begins at breakfast, meaning from the time that we wake up, that light regulation, every choice that we make throughout the day dictates the quality of how we're going to sleep at night. So everything is connected, right?
How does coffee fit into this?
Coffee. That's funny. I have another episode called Caffeine Hacks, but for my first responders and protective services, because they're very big on the caffeine, because obviously they're sleeping during the day and they're working overnight. If you have caffeine in your system, and first we need to recognize that caffeine isn't just drinking coffee, okay? It's not just your Starbucks, your Tim Hortons, your Dunkin' Donuts, which Dunkin' Donuts has the most caffeine because America runs on Dunkin'. It's not just about that. There are energy drinks. People drink Diet Coke for breakfast. We find it in food sources, medications. So everyone metabolizes caffeine at a different rate. It has a half-life of 5 to 8 hours. I've had clients who the very first, they have a cup of black tea in the morning. It's the reason they can't sleep at 10 o'clock at night, right? I have another one who says, well, Soda, I can have a whole pot of coffee. I go right to bed. Doesn't bother me any, right? This is the difference. We have different stages of sleep. We have lighter and deeper stages, not to get too much into it. But our third stage of sleep, what's known as deep sleep, is responsible for our physical recovery. This is where we build muscle. This is where our glucose levels are regulated. But this is also where our immune response. If we do not get enough deep sleep, we're more likely to get sick and we're less likely to actually recover. So when we have caffeine in our system, it reduces it by 20%. Wow. But that is not to say that if you have an espresso or a cappuccino fix, that you cannot do something about it. So there's a study that came out that showed that if you incorporate broccoli into your dinner, or if you were to get a broccoli extract, it actually helps you to metabolize it faster. Oh. And then there are like 10 other things, but you can watch or you can listen to the Doze podcast for that.
Oh,
but yes, there are things that you can do to offset. I don't like to say hacks, but there are definitely things that science supports that will get you to a place, because in the work that I do, I'm very mindful about helping people create intentional shifts with the life that they lead, because one of the issues that we have with sleep is that there's so many generalizations, right? You want to sleep in a dark, cool environment. Absolutely. Why? Because temperature, right? If there's our core body temperature drops about a degree or two, if there's a fluctuation, we wake up, right? Caffeine, light regulation. There's so many tips that are out there, but people don't understand the science of it. And then if they try it, they're quick to dismiss it because they say, you know what, it doesn't fit into my life, right? So it's about applying everything, whether it be a tip, whether it be a tool, in the right way, intentionally to the life that you lead.
Yeah, I love that. So quick question for you, something that you spoke about earlier, the 4 different types of individuals that we are.
Chronotypes.
How do we figure that out?
So there is a sleep psychologist that actually wrote a book called The Power of When, and this book it's a trip because it will even tell you when to ask for a raise, when to fight with your spouse. But it also tells you, like, when's the best time for yoga. Like, for me, being a bear chronotype, I would think that exercising first thing in the morning would be the good thing for me, get me going. But actually, exercising between 5 and 7 is better for me in terms of managing my stress. So it's, you can go to thepowerofwhen.com and it will actually outline that. There's also a sleep application that I promote called Sleep Space, and there's another doctor, but he went a little crazy. He has, like, I think 18 variations of the chronotype because there's hybrids. But if you want to know definitively, like, but I think people know intuitively, like, if they tend to be a night owl, it's just, or like a wolf. When we are looking at things like light at night, that's the reason why it takes us so long, right? Because we are introducing external factors that are preventing our body from doing what it naturally wants to do, right? We think that sleep is optional, but it's a biological need. We require it. Right. And when, you had made the point about driving and then not realizing how you got home, that is something that I often talk about at the beginning of my presentations, because we can suffer from what's known as a microsleep. So when you have been awake for so long, and most people are actually walking around in a state of sleep deprivation, because if you have only slept for 6 hours for 2 weeks straight, it's this equivalent as if you had stayed awake for 48 hours. And it manifests itself in different ways. We sit in front of a computer, we read something 5 times, we don't know what we're saying. We read an email and we're like, I don't know how to write sentences, right? We pull into our driveway and we say, how did I get home? Right. So what happens is, after we've been awake for so long, our brain decides, you know what? I can't function. I have to shut down. And this can actually happen with your eyes open. And this is why we see a number of different things where people will get in an accident within 2 miles of their home because we go into this state of sleep hypnosis, right? Yeah. So it's all correlated with one another. Wow. Yeah.
So something that we screamed about, I don't want to when we were children, take a nap. But now as adults, we crave naps.
It's our goal, right?
Yes. What's your take on taking naps? How does that interfere or boost your sleep at night?
Naps are phenomenal. Again, based on your chronotype, based on your lifestyle. The best nap is between 10 to 30 minutes. You can even have a cup of coffee, and when you wake up, it will actually help you feel that much more alert. There's a study that showed like it boosts productivity like 78% if you do that. The second thing is a 90-minute nap, because that's a full adult sleep cycle. Okay. So this is the thing. Oftentimes people will take a nap, and have you ever taken a nap so deep you wake up and you don't know what year it is?
Yes.
You don't know if like you're in your house, if you're late for school, you're late for the school bus, You're like, I'm 40, I'm not late for the school bus, right? So that's what happens. The timing of our sleep is really important. That also plays into why 72% of Americans wake up feeling tired every single day, because we wake up during the wrong part of our sleep stages. We have light and deep sleep. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people will actually set their alarm with like the most piercing, annoying thing they can find. The best thing for our brains is like a transient, like a sound that gets a little bit louder, because that effect can stay with us up to 4 to 6 hours later. So it's important to set the tone. There are applications that you can use that will do the science for that on you, or do the math on it, I should say, where it'll learn your sleep patterns and learn an algorithm. They're called smart alarms, and it'll wake you up, and it has like a variation between 10 to 15 minutes. Okay. So you could get 8 hours of sleep, and if you wake up during your deep stage, you feel totally unrested, unenergized. You can get 4 hours and actually feel your best if you hit the right stage. So, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. What about snoozing? Is snoozing good for you?
So there's one chronotype, the wolf, the night owl, that can snooze. Generally, it's not recommended more than once or twice. And I did do an episode on snoozing, so you can look that up as well. Because I know we have limited time. We're going to be wrapping it up. But you know, there is a time and place for it. The thing that I don't want to see, that I see often in a lot of my presentations, is, and I always find one where it's like, they set it for every 5 minutes for 90 minutes. And that's like a full sleep cycle. So for like the full sleep cycle, you're disrupting yourself. You're just like, Or, you know, I have people who have a really hard time waking up, so they have like multiple alarms. If that's happening to you, then my suggestion is to perhaps see a sleep specialist, because there are 90 classified sleep disorders. People don't realize how much there is.
Wow.
We know about sleep apnea, which is, you know, people think about snoring and it's not necessarily snoring, but there are certain sleep disorders where there's excessive sleepiness. They're considered wakefulness disorders. They're neurological in nature, but we're like, well, Soda, I can sleep for like 15 hours. So I'm a champion sleeper, right? Or people who say, well, you know, I fell asleep during your podcast episode today, so I'm a champion. So I can sleep anywhere, anytime. And I'm like, those are extreme ends of the spectrum. We don't want to see that. Right. Okay. So you want to make sure that you have a healthy sleep pattern. And through all of my episodes, I pose a number of questions so that you can pinpoint exactly what that looks like, and if not, how to get to the right place.
Awesome.
So that is everything that we have for today. I want to mention that, you know, I've kind of toted a little bit that I have a number of different episode titles. Every Wednesday, you can tune in to the Doze podcast on the Jazzcast Pros Network.
Yes, and HealingHer, new episodes every Friday.